For 5 long years, I sent my dead wife's mother $300 every single month, not because I had extra money, but because I had a promise. I skipped vacations, worked overtime, and learned how to live with less so she wouldn't have to. Every payment felt like a quiet conversation with the woman I lost. A way to say, I still remember, I still care. Then one night, while checking my bank account, I noticed one small detail. A detail so minor, yet so wrong, that it made my chest tighten. I asked a question I never thought I'd ask, and the answer shattered everything I believed about love, loyalty, and family. Before this story takes a darker turn, subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Jerome Williams became a widowed father long before he was ready to be strong. One moment, his world was a warm kitchen filled with laughter. The next, it was hospital rooms, quiet goodbyes, and a little girl asking why mommy wasn't coming home. Before cancer took Kesha away, or so he was told, she held Jerome's hand and whispered the only thing she asked of him, take care of my mother. It wasn't a demand. It was a plea wrapped in love. And Jerome promised, without hesitation. From that day on, every single month, $300 left his account. Not because he had it to spare, but because a promise made in grief feels sacred, unbreakable. Life didn't get easier. Bills stacked up on the kitchen table, like quiet threats. Power shut off. Notices slid under the door. Pizza nights with his daughter slowly turned into grilled cheese and hopeful smiles. Still, the payments never stopped, because Jerome believed something deeply. That love doesn't end when someone dies. It simply changes shape. Or at least, that's what he believed back then. It started with a text message that didn't sound like her. Jerome had memorized his mother-in-law's tone over the years. Polite, careful, almost apologetic. She always thanked him the same way, always used full sentences, always signed off with a blessing. But this message was different. I need the money earlier this month. It's urgent. No greeting, no warmth, just urgency. Jerome stared at his phone longer than he meant to. Grief teaches you to ignore strange feelings, to assume you're the broken one, not the world. So he sent the money early and told himself not to overthink it. Still, something stayed lodged in his chest. A few days later, while searching for an old insurance document, Jerome pulled out a folder he hadn't opened in years. Inside were photocopies Kesha had given him before she got sick. Power of attorney papers, bank authorizations, handwritten notes explaining where important things were kept. That's when he noticed it, the handwriting. Kesha's handwriting was soft, looping, slightly slanted to the right. Her mother's had always been shaky, uneven, the writing of someone whose hands had known arthritis for years. But the signatures on the most recent bank forms, they were firm, confident, steady. Jerome felt a chill crawl up his spine. He tried to laugh it off. Maybe she's having a good day. Maybe the bank updated the forms. Maybe I'm just tired. But the doubts didn't stop. Later that week, Jerome logged into his banking app to double-check the standing transfer. That's when he noticed a pattern. The money wasn't just being withdrawn. It was being moved. Quick transfers. Immediate reallocations. Sometimes within minutes of landing in the account. That wasn't how an elderly woman on a fixed income handled money. Jerome closed the app and rubbed his face. He hated himself for even thinking it. Hated the guilt that came with suspicion. This was Kesha's mother, the woman who raised the love of his life. But doubt, once planted, doesn't need permission to grow. A few days later, Jerome ran into Marcus, an old friend from college who now worked at the local bank. They made small talk near the ATM, the kind people make when they're pretending everything is normal. Jerome almost didn't say anything. Almost. "Hey," he said casually, forcing a shrug. "Can I ask you something off the record?" Marcus studied his face for a second, then nodded. Jerome explained, vaguely at first, the monthly payments, the strange urgency, the odd activity. Marcus didn't interrupt. When Jerome finished, Marcus leaned back against the counter, arms crossed. "Jerome," he said slowly, choosing his words like they could hurt someone if dropped wrong. "This account isn't behaving like it belongs to an elderly woman." The words landed heavy. "What do you mean?" Jerome asked, though his stomach already knew. I mean, the transactions look coordinated, deliberate, like someone who's financially active. Marcus lowered his voice. Someone checking balances daily. Someone who knows exactly when money arrives. Jerome swallowed. So, not someone who forgets passwords, he asked quietly. Marcus didn't answer right away. That account behaves like it's being managed by someone young, he finally said. Someone sharp. Jerome thanked him and walked out of the bank in a fog. The sun was bright. Cars passed. Life kept moving. But something inside Jerome cracked. For 5 years, he had never missed a payment, never questioned, never asked for proof. Because who questions a promise made to the dead? That night, Jerome lay awake listening to his daughter breathe in her sleep. He thought about the overtime shifts, the meals he skipped, the power shut-off notices he'd hidden in drawers. And for the first time since Kesha's death, a terrifying thought formed clearly in his mind. What if the money isn't going where I think it is? Once that question exists, there's no going back. Jerome didn't confront anyone right away. Shock has a way of turning people quiet before it makes them loud. Instead, he followed the only thing that couldn't lie to him anymore, the trail of money. Late nights after his daughter fell asleep, Jerome sat at the kitchen table with his laptop open, tracing transfers and timestamps like a man relearning how to read. The payments left his account, hit the same destination, then moved again and again until one address appeared more than once. An apartment complex on the other side of the city. At first, Jerome told himself it meant nothing. Maybe his mother-in-law had moved closer to medical care. Maybe the bank had rerouted something. But his hands were shaking as he drove there anyway. The complex was quiet. Too quiet. Fresh paint on the walls. Children's bikes near the stairs. Life, ordinary, unremarkable life. Happening everywhere. Jerome parked and walked to the leasing office, heart pounding so hard it drowned out his thoughts. I'm looking for information on a tenant, he said, forcing his voice steady. Family matter. The manager hesitated, then typed something into her computer. What's the name? She asked. Jerome swallowed. Kesha Williams. The room went silent. The manager's eyes flicked to the screen, then back to Jerome. That lease is active, she said carefully. Been that way for years. Jerome felt the floor tilt beneath him. Active. Not closed. Not archived. Active. He left before she could ask more questions. Outside, Jerome leaned against his car, gasping like he'd been underwater too long. His wife's funeral played in his mind. The casket, the flowers, the way his daughter clutched his leg asking why Mommy couldn't hear her anymore. This isn't possible, he told himself. This can't be real. But truth doesn't care what feels possible. Jerome went back the next day. This time, he asked about security footage. Said he was a relative. Said it was urgent. The manager sighed and pulled up the recordings. The screen flickered. A woman stepped into frame. Jerome's breath caught in his throat. She was older. Her hair was different. Longer, styled in a way Jerome had never seen. Her face carried more confidence, more ease. But it was her, Kesha, alive, healthy, laughing as she held the door for a man walking beside her. Jerome pressed closer to the screen, hands trembling. Then his chest caved in completely. Kesha rested a hand on her stomach. Pregnant. The man beside her wrapped an arm around her shoulders and whispered something that made her smile. The kind of smile she used to give Jerome when the world felt safe. Jerome stumbled back. No, he whispered. No, no. The woman he buried had never died. There had been no cancer. No last breath. No sacred goodbye. The grief that hollowed him out for 5 years had been manufactured, designed, executed, while Jerome worked overtime and skipped meals, while his daughter grew up without her mother, while he honored a promise made in love. His wife had been living another life. And every month, like clockwork, Jerome's love had been turned into a paycheck. He left the office numb, the world blurring around him. Somewhere inside, something fundamental broke. Not just his heart, but his understanding of reality itself. Jerome didn't sleep that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the security footage again. Kesha's laugh, her hand on her stomach, the casual ease of someone who had never been sick, never dying, never gone. By morning, grief had burned itself into something sharper. Anger, not the loud kind, the dangerous, focused kind. Jerome knew one thing. If this was real, and every instinct told him it was, then the truth would be buried under layers of lies designed to look official, carefully constructed, legally intimidating. So he hired a private investigator. Her name was Dana Cole, former Financial Crimes Unit. Quiet voice, eyes that missed nothing. Jerome didn't tell the whole story at first. He didn't need to. He slid a folder across her desk, bank statements, photocopied documents, screenshots from the apartment complex. Dana studied them slowly. Then she looked up. "How far do you want to go?" she asked. "All the way," Jerome said. His voice didn't shake. "I want to know who took my life from me." Dana didn't ask more questions. Within a week, the story began to unravel. The first thing she found was a death certificate. It looked real, stamped, signed, registered, but it wasn't. The issuing hospital had no record of Kesha Williams ever being admitted. Not for cancer, not for treatment, not for anything. The doctor listed on the certificate, retired years before the date of death. Fake. Next came the hospital records Jerome remembered holding while crying in a plastic chair. Forged. The letterhead had been copied from a legitimate oncology center. The signatures matched no one on staff. The patient ID numbers belonged to different people. People who were very much alive. Then Dana found the insurance paperwork. There was no payout, no claim filed, because the policy never existed. Jerome had been told there wasn't time to process it. That cancer had moved too fast. That details would come later. Later never came, because it was never meant to. The deeper Dana dug, the uglier it got. Kesha's mother wasn't a victim. She was a partner. The bank account Jerome had been paying into wasn't hers originally. It had been transferred to her name months before the death. The address on file had changed repeatedly, each time closer to Kesha's new life. And Jerome wasn't the only one. Dana uncovered at least 9 other cases across 3 states. Grieving husbands, grieving wives, all told the same story. Aggressive illness, sudden death, requests for temporary help from surviving family members, monthly payments, guilt-driven compliance, silence enforced by grief. It wasn't just a lie. It was a system. Kesha and her mother hadn't simply disappeared into a new life. They had built a business on grief. A quiet, efficient operation that preyed on people too broken to question anything. Jerome listened as Dana laid everything out. Each word landed like a blow. "So she planned it," Jerome said finally. "Yes," Dana replied. "For at least a year before she left you." Jerome thought about the nights Kesha had cried in his arms, the whispered fears, the urgency in her voice when she made him promise to take care of her mother. That promise wasn't love. It was leverage. The realization made Jerome's hands curl into fists. "Stop the payments," Dana said. "Today." Jerome nodded. For the first time in 5 years, he didn't feel obligated. He logged into his bank account and canceled the transfer. No note, no explanation, just silence. The phone rang less than an hour later. He didn't answer. It rang again and again. Then came the text messages. "Why didn't the payment go through? Jerome, this isn't funny. You know I need that money." By evening, the tone changed. "You promised. You can't do this to me. You don't understand what you're getting into." Jerome turned the phone face down. He made dinner for his daughter, helped her with homework, read her a story, tucked her in. When he came back to the living room, there were 12 missed calls. Then the threat started. "You signed documents. We have proof. If you stop paying, we'll destroy you." Blackmail. They sent photos Jerome recognized, old signatures lifted from real paperwork, altered to look incriminating. They referenced legal consequences that didn't exist, hoping fear would do the rest. But something had changed. Fear had lost its grip. Jerome forwarded everything to Dana. "They're panicking," she said calmly. "People don't threaten when they're in control. That night, Jerome sat alone in the dark. For 5 years, his life had been shaped by guilt, by a promise extracted at his weakest moment. He had lived small, quiet, obedient. And now, the people who controlled him were unraveling. Because lies only work as long as everyone agrees to believe them. The phone rang one last time. Jerome answered. "Jerome," his mother-in-law's voice said, shaking now. "Please, you don't know what you're doing." He took a breath. "Oh, I know exactly what I'm doing," he replied. Then he hung up. For the first time since the day he buried a woman who never died, Jerome felt something close to power. And this time, it belonged to him. The end didn't come with shouting or drama. It came quietly, the way real justice often does. Federal agents took over the case within weeks. What Dana uncovered was too big, too organized, and too cruel to ignore. Bank records were subpoenaed, IP addresses traced, false documents pulled apart line by line until the lies collapsed under their own weight. Early one morning, Jerome received a call. "They're moving," Dana said. "It's happening." By nightfall, arrests were made. Kesha was taken into custody outside the same apartment complex where Jerome had seen her on that screen, the place where a stolen life had been built on someone else's suffering. Her partner was arrested with her. So was her mother. The network unraveled fast once the pressure started. Fake death certificates, forged hospital records, dozens of manipulated victims. In court, the truth was finally spoken out loud, not whispered, not hidden, not buried under sympathy. Kesha Williams faced charges that carried decades in prison. Her mother, the woman Jerome once trusted with his grief, was sentenced for her role in the fraud. Jerome sat in the courtroom and felt nothing he expected, no satisfaction, no desire for revenge, just release. The anger that had lived in his chest for years drained away, replaced by something steadier, freedom. The freedom to stop explaining himself, to stop apologizing for surviving, to stop paying for a lie. He walked out of the courthouse lighter than he'd walked in. That night, Jerome went home and sat at the same kitchen table where he once traced bank statements with shaking hands. He opened his laptop and made one final change. The $300 transfer was reinstated. But this time, the destination was different. A savings account in his daughter's name. College, security, choice. The future that had been quietly stolen from her, reclaimed. Jerome tucked his daughter into bed that night and kissed her forehead. She smiled in her sleep, safe, unaware of how close her life had come to being shaped by someone else's greed. Jerome stood there for a moment longer than usual. He hadn't won by destroying anyone. He had won by taking his life back. And for the first time in 5 years, the money and the love behind it was finally going exactly where it always should have been. For years, Jerome believed that keeping a promise meant carrying a burden alone. He sacrificed, suffered, and let grief shape his life, never imagining it could be exploited. But in the end, he discovered something profound. Love is meant to protect, not control, and grief is sacred, not a currency for someone else's gain. Jerome didn't seek revenge. He reclaimed his life, his dignity, and his daughter's future. If this story touched your heart, share and subscribe, because it's a reminder that truth always surfaces, lies eventually crumble, and healing begins the moment we refuse to be fooled any longer. Sometimes, the bravest act of love is choosing to protect yourself and those you truly care about.